as an agent, 5 of which were with EXP. And I'm excited to talk with everyone today. So why don't we go around the horn here and let everybody introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about your business and maybe how you differentiate yourself within your market. Rick, you want to start?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Rick Jiha, 43 years selling real estate. Just celebrated that a couple weeks ago. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I cover the major part of Northern California. I have a team of 5 buyer's agents and some admin. And I'd say the way we differentiate ourselves is in 2 ways from the agent perspective, and that is that we cover a huge geographic area, so we don't say no to anything practically, and that we have systematic processes.
5 years, because they're making this decision repeatedly. If they've been renting for 7 years.
Did you guys lose me? Hello?
No, that was the YouTube that's still on the screen for some reason. Wait, keep going.
Okay, you can still hear me okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Yeah, so and then because I'm a coach for a large company, I'm also coached by that company, and we're using their processes and systems to have incredible follow-up and those kinds of things. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Lane, you want to go next?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I just want to start off by saying thank you very much for having me on the panel today. This is my first panel, and pretty happy to be here. My name is Lane Britton. I have a small team here on Vancouver Island in Canada, so far west coast, and we service the southern Vancouver Island. What differentiates us from everybody else? I guess we kind of live by the motto that we created, which is doing things differently and getting great results. We do a lot of social media, a lot of video content, but we just try to build the best relationships we can with everybody, and it's been very successful.
Great. Thanks, Lane. If you aren't talking, if you just mute yourself, just so you can avoid any background noise. Is it Gaurav? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Hi. Good morning, everybody. This is Gaurav Singh here from Ontario, specifically Greater Toronto area in Canada, and glad to be here again. And today, the interesting thing is Vishal Saxena is also in my team, and it's a pleasure to share stage with him in this ICONversation along with rest of you. So what differentiates our model is that even though my license in real estate is less than 4-year-old, but I think we are creating some niche in certain underrepresented segments in the market, which were unstructured sectors. I'll get to that later during our conversation. And my background in management consulting sort of is helping us to put structure around it and create great business for me and my team together.
Great. So I guess that's a good lead into Vishal. Vishal, you ready to tell us a little bit about yourself? Well, wait, Gaurav, you mentioned unstructured sectors. Did I hear that right?
Yes. So, probably that's not the right word, but to me, unstructured is something, for example, there are some segments in market. For example, in Canada, we have something called assignment sale, where people are trying to exit out of builder contracts in pre-construction. So that used to be a broker to broker or a B2B model, where brokers will share informally the listings within their network in general, because as per the contract, it cannot be advertised on MLS. And since there is no underlying property to be shown or so it's very hard to sell it directly to buyers. So me and my team here, we have made a portal, and we have started collecting a lot of these listings. Most of them happen to be now in distressed segment, because obviously the interest rate hikes have created some pressure on the buyers who sort of entered these contracts a year or two back at, let's say, 2% rate, and now they're finding it hard to carry these properties at 7% interest. So this property this segment actually suddenly is booming here, and among ourselves we have done at least 2 dozen deals within the last 6 months, 7 months alone. So now putting a structure around it, how we can market these things, and how we are able to present it direct to prospective buyer clients, so we can double end on these deals, is something sort of a homemade system we are working on, having a portal which is connected to our CRM, and our ISAs do the whole buyer profiling and talking to them and making those deals happen. So it's interesting, how these things that was maybe some agent doing 1 or 2 odd deals in a year, and we are kind of turning it into our mainstream business basically.
That's super interesting. So you said these were pre-construction, so they don't own the property yet. They just have a contract on it.
Exactly. So this is kind of where it gets a lot of interesting aspect, right? So the whole idea is that you have a contract from a builder, let's say, and if the builder is allowing you to resell it, maybe for a profit, to a third party ahead of that thing even getting finished, so that's an interesting scenario where the contract name is changing on the builder records, and then we have a new buyer instead when the time comes for closing. So there are special clauses we have to build in. So we worked with some top lawyers here. So we tried, because no matter what we were doing, there is so many if then else that can go wrong or happen, right? So we had to capture these scenarios within our contracts, which we are building for the sale. So even though our real estate board allows it, but since now the market turned so much that a lot of investor buyers panicked, especially, and these properties, if they close, are not even cash positive anymore due to high interest rates. So, but it's actually a great deal for first-time home buyers. For example, they are able to buy things at prices, let's say, that were 2 years ago, and they are happy to get their hands on these things because they need a house anyways. So it's kind of working because we are trying to be a market maker now in this segment. And what I've noticed the trend is, and I think Vishal can also say, add to it later, that we enter one project, let's say, that's coming to closing or occupancy in next 90 days or 120 days. So if we get one listing here, we market it really well. We kind of get like 15-20 leads specifically for that particular distressed listing, because obviously seller is trying to exit and the price is really good. So not only are we able to cross sell to the remaining 10 buyers something else in that segment, in that area, but again, I'm noticing that we are attracting more sellers now, because our marketing has been nice on social media. So there have been so much more sellers who are trying to exit in the same situation, and we are suddenly getting 3-4 more listings within a couple more weeks, right? So it's kind of helping my team grow, and even though a lot of us are doing it as a secondary sort of trade in addition to our resale practice, but the volume of inquiries has grown up so much that we have to hire 2 admins just to keep up with those kind of, sort of ISAs, to keep up with those listings to be updated and floor plans to be exchanged and emails to be drafted. So a lot of things going on in the background to make this thing work.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we have similar situations here in Austin. The developers don't allow the buyer, though, to change. So we've had to figure out some workarounds, either using, and it's probably a little bit different in Canada, but you can use a trust, which still allows the buyer to use primary residence financing. It's like basically like an LLC, which would be another option to be able to somehow in the background switch out the buyer without the developer having any visibility to that, so they don't have an issue with it. But that's good that they allow you to switch that out. Joel, you with us now? Saw a blink. All right. Well, we'll move on to the the next, the first question, I guess, really. Let's talk a little bit about managing your time effectively and how you prioritize tasks as a real estate agent. I know for newer agents that can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many different disciplines within operating a business that we are responsible for. And it's great when you get to the stage that we're all at here on stage, no pun intended, but that you have people helping you. And so you have an operations manager that's really organized and good at that. You have an administrative assistant and you have other people helping. But when you're early on, you're doing all those roles. Are there any tools or strategies that have been particularly helpful in staying organized and productive? Who wants to take that?
I don't mind starting on that.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, so something I talk to all the time with even high producers and lower producers is, are you controlling your day or is your day controlling you? And, you know, even when you have staff and everything, my wife is probably one of the best mirrors I've ever met, because she says on a regular basis, is that the best use of your time right this minute? And if you have somebody in your business that's doing that with you, I always, you know, like when we're talking about business, we always say, who's your running partner? My wife isn't a real estate, doesn't sell real estate, but she's my business partner, my life partner, so she can catch not valuing my and run an excellent team. So I have a form called the Daily Success Habits form, and I'm happy to get it to Brian, and he can distribute it. It comes from the coaching company I work for, but we like sharing it with people. And the Daily Success Habits form has two things on it. Has an ability for you to run a 30-minute timer from the minute your feet hit the floor in the morning till the minute your feet jump into bed at night, every 30 minutes, to have your timer go off and write down on the form what you did that last 30 minutes. Not what was in your calendar, but what did you actually do in the last 30 minutes? I got a cup of coffee, I checked my email, I let the dog out to go to the bathroom, like those kinds of things. And when you do that for 7 straight days, you have a very, very good, and you don't need a form, by the way, you can just do that on a sheet of paper. But if you do that for 7 days, you're gonna have a very, very harsh realization of how much time gets wasted in a week. I like that to be the very first thing that when I'm working with coaching clients, or I'm working with my team, or my wife and I are working together on ourselves and our business, that's the first thing we look at, is where can we get better at being strict about our day and our time spent. We always like to say that the biggest difference between the biggest producers in the world and the lowest producers is only one thing, and that's the activities you focus on in a day. And that right there is probably the best advice I can give as it relates to us and how we take care of that, is starting to know where your time is going. One last example, and David, I think that's an incredible question, by the way, is that every day should have in it a minimum of 1 hour of lead generation at least 5 days a week. A minimum of 1 hour per day. So, you know, a lot of us, we get in the habit of I did 3 hours of door knocking yesterday, so today I'm just not going to do any lead gen. No, it's a minimum of 1 hour every day. And if you do 3 hours, good for you. You don't get any bonus points. You just get more business. So having that be in your schedule every day. Also, I like to see a minimum of 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon of catch up, like a 30-minute slot where you can catch up on email, voicemails, text, handle emergencies that came up that aren't generally able to be handled if your schedule is really strict and full. And because I'm a very active recruiter and a very active listing agent, I have to be very, very strict about my schedule. And the last thing I'd say is that most people don't put drive time in their calendar. It's something that we've found has really helped. In other words, if your appointment is 15 minutes away, you still need time to get out the door, get your stuff in the car, and get there. So we always put a 30-minute schedule, a 30-minute drive time into my calendar before I'm going to an appointment and things like that. So don't want to hog too much time, but I think that was the end of that one.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. That was super valuable. Yeah, what I've heard is called a time audit. And so if you've never done a time audit, or you haven't done one in the last 2 years, it's always good to redo those and do the 30-minute timer, write down what you've been doing. So I highly recommend taking Rick's suggestion there and seeing where your time's actually going. The saying performance measured equals performance gains. So if you don't know where it's actually going, then you can't really make an adjustment and improve. And then the everyday setting an hour of lead gen. So I've heard the metaphor, and you can look this up, around big rocks. And I think it's a great metaphor of like, you have to schedule in the most important things and make sure you're taking time or making time for your priorities. And in this business, it's going to be lead gen and creating new business. And one tip I like scheduling the drive time, is have in your task manager like a tag, or you just put call in the front, but stuff that you can easily do, like make phone calls while you're driving, to be really efficient with your time, so you can kind of double dip on that drive time. So thank you, Rick. Anybody else want to add to that question? I can repeat it if you need me to.
Can you please repeat? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, is that Vishal?
Yes, it's Vishal. Okay, my mic was not working before. I forgot to turn it on because it's my first time in Icon, and so that's
well, I'll repeat the question, then you can intro yourself briefly and answer it. So how do you effectively manage your time and prioritize tasks as a real estate agent? Are there any tools or strategies that have been particularly helpful in staying organized and productive?
First of all, how I start my day, I start my day by checking messages, email, and WhatsApp messages. For each buyer, I have a WhatsApp group, and any message, any question they have, they communicate through that one. So it's very comfortable for me and for them as well. I answer all of their questions before I go to sleep. And in the morning, first thing I check, if they have any question or concern, or they want to see any property, or they have any question. And then next 2 hours are my lead gen. I usually do some cold calling, some prospecting, and try to call some old clients. Every Sunday, I have a list, I call 10 of my old clients to whom I bought a house about a year or 2 years ago. So because mostly after 2 years, 3 years, most of them, they are thinking to either to upgrade or they want to change, or they are thinking of some investments, or they have some reference, somebody's looking. So in this way, my name, it reminds them of my name. And if they have any reference, it comes to me. 30 to 40% of my business is coming through word of mouth, through reference, and rest of them is coming through social media and KV Core, which is very helpful so far. So these are my strategies. That's how I'm generating my business. And and I can tell you, this year, when in Canada the market is slow, I was able to cap in 28 days, and I should be hitting my icon in 3 months. So I'm just trying to tell that how important it is to stay in touch with your old clients, and how important it is to do some prospecting and cold calling on regular basis. That's what I do, and that's what's generating lots of leads for me every day.
Yeah, it sounds like the good old blocking and tackling. You're sticking to the basics, which is keeping in touch with your sphere and then lead genning for new potential clients. So thank you, Vishal. Anybody else want to give any input on this question? Otherwise, I can move on to the next one.
I'll just say really quickly that, I spent 5 years in real estate just scrambling. I was very successful, but no calendars, nothing, just kind of running on the seat of my pants all the time, So when I got my assistant, and I was very, very particular about finding the right person who now manages majority of the company and a lot of the agents that are in there, as well as the people that are in our group that we've sponsored in. So she's been absolutely vital to my business. She's been really one of the number one keys to how the business has grown so much. So I highly recommend that, if you are a high producing agent that, you don't have an assistant, this is the time to really start to think about that. But we also use Follow Up Boss as our CRM, and Follow Up Boss has been amazing. It integrates with our system, and then of course the ISAs. So booking appointments, calendar scheduling, things like that all goes through them. I basically now just have to show up, which is awesome, and I love the way it works.
Awesome. Thanks, Lane. Yeah, I also use Follow Up Boss. The thing that sold me on it is having a separate phone number, and I like having that separate for my personal number. So I can kind of create some more boundaries around when people can text me. So I can block that through iOS. I can block follow-up boss, so I can't get messages there after 9 p.m. or before 9 a.m. To kind of just protect my brain, my mental, whatever. Lane, that brings up a good question around assistance. So if somebody's newer, and anybody I guess can chime in on this, but I think it's tough to know when to make that leap and hire someone. So when would y'all say is a good time to make that first hire?
I'll jump in. Over the years that I've, because I've been in 43 years, I've gone through 5 or 6 major downfalls. So my team has been big and then it's crumbled to nothing, and it's been big and crumbled to nothing. But also in talking to people building is that sometimes the first hire could be just a contract transaction coordinator. Sometimes the first hire might be a buyer's agent, depending on how you run things. And sometimes it might be an actual paid admin. And a lot of people say, I can't afford an admin. I remember my very first admin in 1991 was 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, and then moved her slowly but surely to full time. So you really want to take a really good look at your business and look at what you're not willing to give up yet. Like I was working with a guy who was super detail oriented, and didn't want to let go of the paperwork, but was starting to be overwhelmed with buyers. So I wouldn't normally make the very first hire a buyer's agent, but in this case, that was what was going to serve him best. And so it's really good to take a look at where is your time being spent the most, and where could you get more time back. A lot of people say, well, like all my buyer's agents on my teams are on 50-50. And they'll say, well, yeah, but I'm giving up 50%. I go, no. You're not giving up anything. You're giving a buyer somebody you trust to take care of them. You're getting to keep 50% of the commission, and you are using that time that you would have been with that buyer, let's say 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever time, to create more in your business. And that is what's vital, is that you've created that time. I got a coaching tip from Gary Keller himself when I was at Keller Williams, and he said, take the 2 hours or 3 hours you would have been with that buyer, and now go sit down and take that exact amount of time, because pretend you didn't give up the buyer, and sit down and lead generate for listings, because that's your job as the team leader, to bring in listings. So the question is, for me, not answerable by just like I would talk to the person, say, where's your business going? But those are the best to look at for your first 3 hires, is either a contract transaction coordinator, an assistant, or a buyer's agent.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of the thought process or philosophy of going from a scarcity mindset to abundance. And if you're worried about losing the 50% on that commission versus thinking about let's say that 50% is $5,000 versus the 20 or 30 grand you can create, because now you have that free time to go get a couple extra listings. So I think that's valuable. When I was a new agent, I didn't fully understand the ideal relationship with the other agents I was doing deals with on the other side of the table. And real estate transactions often involve negotiations. Maybe just talk about like what that relationship should look like with the other agent, and what are some proven negotiation techniques or tips that you found effective in securing favorable outcomes for your clients. Lane, you want to start off on this one?
Hey, sorry about that. I was just I had to finish something there, but can you repeat that question for me?
Yeah, just what the relationship with the other agent should be. Because I think when I was new, I didn't really fully understand that. And I kind of felt like, I think probably my first couple of deals, I was a little bit more adversarial versus collegial. And so kind of how you can get the best outcome for your client while still, having a good relationship with the agent, and some negotiation techniques as well.
Well, this is one thing that I absolutely always talk about with other agents in my group, as well as other agents in our business, and of course here in our area. And I came from a long background in the automotive industry. And in the automotive industry, everybody was like fighting against each other. Whereas I found that as soon as I came into real estate, everybody really, on the most part, tried to work together. But the way I feel about it is that, when I'm working with another agent, there's one outcome that is the most important. And that is that we get both parties agreeing on something. So I think the relationship between agents really needs to be so valued to all agents. And I know that some don't agree with that, and some always want to be that kind of like, I want to be the one on top, and I'm going to be the aggressor or whatever. And I've never ever been like that. I develop relationships with every agent that's in my market as well, because to have an understanding where you're both just doing the best for your clients, there's always two parties in this, and here in British Columbia, just so you guys know, we don't have the ability to do a double-ended deal, so we always have two realtors. And having those two realtors on point together is going to lead to the best outcomes for both of the buyer, for both the buyer and the seller, right? If you're not working together, you're not doing a service to your clients, right? Doesn't mean you have to bend over or not kind of explain your points, but having a good relationship with that agent is going to help you express how your client feels, where that deal is going to go, and how to come to the best meeting ground.
Yeah. And, I think it can be tough as a fiduciary. Sometimes it feels like you have to beat them up over the head to try to get the best deal. So that it isn't usually the case, though. I think, sometimes you do come across an agent that's a bit adversarial. What's a good way to deal with somebody that's a little bit harder to deal with? Maybe they don't have the same philosophy around dealing with other agents. I know that I've treated as if like, hey, I might run across this agent again on another deal. And in the 7 years I've been an agent, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 times I've done a deal with an agent for a second time. So it's not even that common in my market because there's so many agents, and I'm sure it's not that much different in these other markets. But I kind of keep that in mind. But if you do come across somebody that's a little bit harder to work with, how do you deal with that situation?
I'm going to jump in real quick. Dave, is it okay to jump in real quick, David, on that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. So I loved what Lane said, is that, the idea is that both the seller and the buyer are happy and that they get a good deal. And I got to tell you, over the year, the only reason I'm still in real estate after 43 years is I'm still making up for about 37 years of mistakes. So you learn as you go that your emotions, yours, meaning the real estate agent, has no business in this transaction. Your emotions have no business. Your need to be right. Those don't have any place here. Those are all based on your ego. And I'm very clearly the oldest person here today, not just in age, but in years in the business. And I can tell you that as soon as I see that an agent on the other end is starting to be, I got to be right, I got to be in my emotions, it's all about me, not about the buyer, not about the seller, then I just ask them to, if they would, not text me any longer, but for the sake of keeping a complete file, that's exactly how I say it, would you mind making sure that me and my entire team are on every email? Why? Well, California is the most litigated real estate state in the nation. And if every email gets put into SkySlope so that it's all tracked, then I don't have any side conversations going on that aren't tracked. That's a protection thing for me and my client, whether I'm representing the buyer or the seller. In addition, I am being able to control my mood swings that are being possibly caused by this person's overemphasis on an emotion. And so I just keep it in check. I'll read the email and I won't press send until I've read it 2 more times. And then sometimes I'll even send it to my transaction coordinator and say, does this sound harsh? Does this sound like I'm too positioned? And the main thing is that I'm always working for my client's best interest, along with the best interest being that this deal needs to close for it to be everybody's best interest. But yeah, I would say be very careful. and watch what you say in emails and texts. I let an F word fly once, and it's the only time another agent has called the broker, the designated managing broker of the state of California. And I got a call from her, and I'm like older than her, been in the real estate business longer than her. And I got a call from her, and she just started giggling. And she said, "Rick, did you really say that to the agent?" And I said, "Yes, push my buttons." And she said, she just stopped, laughed for a minute, and said, "Rick, keep it classy." And then she goes, "I'll let you go now. Bye." So yeah, it doesn't pay off. But anyway,
yeah, that was over the phone. You dropped the F-bomb?
I dropped it in a text, which is even worse because then there's written proof.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if having everybody else on the team CC'd also maybe calms them down a little bit. They're like, "Oh man, there's like a couple people that are going to be reading this. Maybe I should be a little bit nicer." I don't know if that was part of your intended effect by having a bunch of people on it as well.
It absolutely is. So.
And then, I mean, the other thing I like to do, which is kind of contrary to your kind of keeping it in writing and having like a whole history of everything that's been said, is sometimes just like via text or email, things can get misinterpreted. So just picking up the phone and just, killing them with kindness and just being like, they hear your voice and you can disarm them a little bit. I think this is in any situation, not just real estate. I found this with like tough conversations with friends, just like picking up the phone and letting them hear your voice. And often that makes a big difference. And then if it's something in real estate where you talked about something, I always follow it up with an email like, "Hey, here's what we just chatted about," and make sure there's a record and just say, "Hey, please confirm that we're on the same page." So that way you can kind of hit both. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Rick? Did we lose Rick?
I'm in 100% agreement. I think avoiding the phone is a big mistake. And to add to what you said, David, if I do a conversation on the phone, I recap it in an email immediately following the phone conversation. And yes, I love killing them with kindness, keep my emotions in check, don't make somebody wrong. And just because you don't make them wrong doesn't mean that you have to make them right. You just don't make them wrong. You can say things like, "I can see why you think that," or "I understand where you're coming from." That's not an agreement. That's just keeping them from being wrong. And then when I recap it in an email, the last sentence of the email say, "Please respond right away with whether or not you feel this email clarifies what we discussed on the phone," so that there's no misunderstanding. But yeah, for sure. Good,
Great.
Very good comments yourself, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I think that's so important to be communicating effectively and then keeping a history of it. So, all right, so let's move on. So what are some, and I guess we'll go to Gaurav for this one to start. What are some common mistakes or pitfalls that you've seen newer agents make earlier in their careers, and how can they avoid or overcome those challenges to achieve success in the industry?
That's something I can relate to, certainly, because as I said, I'm barely finishing second year in EXP and another year before I got my license, so 3 years in all. So I think obviously, when somebody is new, we more have the theoretical knowledge, right? You just did your exams, passed them with flying colors, great. And we are here in the middle of a deal, especially, when I got my license, we were in the earlier phase of the bull run. So any house I will take my buyers to, we will get so many, overlapping showings. And then obviously we will see that the offers themselves are multiple offers. And in Ontario, multiple offers kind of are blind offers for everybody. So that's exactly where, I felt overwhelmed. But again, you cannot tell that to your buyer, right? I cannot tell them I'm overwhelmed by this, because it's my job to get them through get this deal and possibly at a best price, right? But if everybody's flying blind, nobody knows, it's all by guesswork. So, I think initially what I did wrong was, I set their expectations lower. And then I told them, don't worry, this house will not go that high. let's not go more than this. This is what I would not pay more than that, without realizing, the market is taking off. So if somebody really likes their house, we have to see till the very last minute what's going on, keep it nice with the listing agent. So at least get some cues, like non-verbal cues or some hints they might try to drop, right? So I kind of missed out on that conversation, that which probably more seasoned realtors already know. Like technically, the listing agent is not allowed, or neither will give you things out like in terms of pure numbers. But then if we talk to them and then connect with them nicely, explain our clients profile, and I kind of work with good clients, so they have no issues with mortgage. They had their down payment ready, and even if, for example, the appraisal comes slightly lower than what we are overbidding, they are in a great shape. So these things we have to tell them. Like nobody's asking me to tell these things to the listing agent, but if I create a great profile in the listing agent's head, they will certainly come back, and which I realized after a few transactions when I didn't get through, right? And they still try to tell me that, okay, you are still in the game if you want to try one more time, right? So that was one instance. But I think there are some things, for example, that come purely with experience, and as we go up, get more and more involved in the deals, we will get better at those. That's my side at it, basically.
Yeah, always trying to be calm and confident and display that with your clients, even if on the inside, if you're newer, you're like, I don't know what the heck's going on.
No, that's exactly. I think it's same. It was probably that time same with everybody else. I mean, obviously now we are in the debate whether we should come out of that blind bidding, because in GTA market, it's become a norm. People deliberately list things lower to incite bidding wars, and even at this time we are still getting multiple offers. And then again, that is the only place I think I felt where, well, one of the biggest time when experience matters a lot, like how many transactions we have done, basically.
Yeah, I think being first in on those situations, like it hits the market, your clients know it's perfect for them, and you just go in really strong right from the beginning and try to see if you can get it before anybody else even submits, or they've already got a couple offers and you're like, all right, well, I'll be the last in. And you're talking to the agent, and I know here in Austin, some agents are pretty coy about what's going on, but sometimes if I just press them with some different types of questions, I'll just ask in different ways and just be like, well, we're thinking of coming in at 550. Does that even make sense to submit? And their response just to that question can give you a lot of insight, like maybe 550, we were thinking we don't even have a shot. And they're like, yeah, and we were going to really come in at, 600, but they go, oh yeah, definitely submit that. And all of a sudden we're like, great. Okay. Well, maybe we don't have to go to 600. So you can definitely glean insights based on the communication. So it's just good at getting a lot of reps, I think, is important. The more times you try those things and you hear different responses and then you see how they play out, is really helpful. So experience for sure.
And David, can I add something to it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I think like the most common mistake, like in my opinion, the new realtors do is like failure to listen to client needs. It's a vicious circle. It's a 3-point circle, which I can relate to some of my realtors. Like I always tell them, like, don't listen to them to respond to them. Listen to them to understand them. So if you don't understand client's need, in that case, you will be ending up in over-promising and under-delivering. So if you don't understand their needs, you can do over-promising that what exactly they're looking for, and at the end, you will under-deliver, and that will lead to failure to build a referral network. So if you are under-delivering to a client, you can never get a referral from those clients. So you are ending up of a loop, which can generate you indefinite leads or indefinite business. So this is the common mistake they do. Like if they are focusing on one of their clients to understand their needs and deliver more than they are expecting, like basically under promise and over deliver, you will build a long stream of referral of leads network to them for their future business. That's, I think, the most important 3 points I teach them. Each new realtor they join in my team, like currently there are 14 direct and 7 indirect in my downline. And that's what I teach them on weekly basis. And so far, like, it's running good. So that's from my side.
So yeah, that's super valuable. I hope everybody got that, which is setting proper expectations. And I always make sure if an agent tells me, yeah, we're going to have an answer for you in an hour, I'll often go to my client and be like, yeah, we're going to have an answer today, knowing that most of the time these agents are wrong in their predictions, and they get back to me 3 hours later, and then my client isn't disappointed because I told him an hour, even though I knew the agent was probably going to be wrong. So making sure you give buffers in some of those things and you set good expectations so that you can under promise and over deliver, as Vishal was saying. Does anybody else want to chime in on this question before we move on to the next one? All right, so I don't know if Lane, if you want to jump in on this next question here. So can you provide, we talked about difficult, working with other agents that are maybe a little bit difficult to work with. How about managing difficult clients or difficult situations that arise during a real estate transaction? Because, I know I'll tell clients at the beginning that every real estate transaction, there's a hurdle. I don't know what it's going to be right now, but when we get to it, we're going to help you get around it, over it, through it, whatever it's going to take to get you to the finish line. And how do you maintain professionalism and ensure a positive outcome during those challenging situations?
Well, this is an awesome question. And David, this has been really great. These questions are awesome. And this is very much in my wheelhouse. I'm an extremely positive person. Like everybody that comes across with me, they always say the same thing. And I really try to always be the guy that's on the positive end of things, even if it's in an unfortunate situation. But, as a realtor, I will say that, we are their biggest kind of counselor, right? Transactions, the smoothest transactions are going to have some level of stress or some sort of an issue. It just never seems to not be the case. And even when you get that one that goes through completely seamlessly and you go, wow, that's great, you forget about that one. You only remember the ones that are difficult, right? But, I think that always having that moment to kind of not be reactive, just take a step back, have your clients and just always be calm and explain, hey, these things do come up, not very often, but, they do come up. We're here to make sure that through every step of this transaction, I'm by your side. We're going to get through it. This year seems to have been, honestly, one of the most stressful years for transactions in the 7 years that I've been doing this. And, there's been a lot of people that have been, right on the edge, like, oh my God, this is not going to happen. What are we going to do? But, if you maintain a positive attitude and you're calm and you're able to, help your clients just feel that, you're also there in their corner, you're the agent that's going to, make sure that, whatever the situation, whether it be with the mortgage, the financing mortgage, whether it be some of the conditions, maybe it's the home inspection, the stress of losing out, because that's been a big thing here for many years. We have a very tight marketplace here. Those type of things I think are specialists, and these are the type of reasons why we're in this business. I can guarantee you that the majority of the agents that are on this panel, in this room, working for EXP, working for other franchise brokerages, they got into this, obviously we do this for several different reasons, but majority of it is because we can relate to people, because we can connect to people. We can build relationships better than most people that, aren't in a customer-based business. And being able to be the leader in the situation and be able to hold their hand, be able to walk them through and give them confidence, as well as, that positive reassurance, it's going to make the transaction go well. But we are, we're therapists for the most part. We're counselors. We're that shoulder to cry on, but we're also the people that are there to high five and big hugs at the end of the transaction.
Yeah, I think a valuable line that you said so casually, which is I think the importance of it is we're going to get through it. And like you said, being the leader and conveying that confidence. When I look at, whenever I'm working with another service provider, I always try to draw parallels. And I went into work with a new trainer about a year and a half ago. I was really discouraged because I had a knee issue and I didn't think I was ever going to be able to run again, and or let alone squat with any significant weight on my back. And in that first session, the trainer just casually was like, "Oh, dude, we're going to have you squatting over 200 pounds in no time." And he said it so casually and nonchalantly with so much confidence. And all of a sudden it just like lit me up. I was like, damn, this guy thinks I can actually do it. And this is a guy that trains tons of people. And so we're like the equivalent of that for them. Like they're only buying a house every 7 years. But we're doing this every week. So when they come in and maybe they're not even sure, like, you know, if you look at 2021 when things were nuts and there's 10 offers, and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to buy a house. And we're like, dude, we're totally going to get you a house. It's going to be great. Don't worry about it. And just something nonchalant like that, we're going to get through it, goes such a long way because we're the professional and the leader, as Lane said. So thank you for that, Lane.
David?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Rick. You make some really good points, and so did Lane. Actually, I'm taking notes like a crazy man. I did want to say that, like, long before, when I was years before Keller Williams and years before EXP, you know, I'm a regular agent in town and I didn't have an ulterior motive for being professional. So let's just say right now, I would not be anything less than professional because I have an ulterior motive. I want to recruit everybody I talk to EXP. But before there was an ulterior motive, what you had said earlier is I'm in a marketplace where the chances are I'm going to come across that person again. I'm either going to show their listing, they're going to show mine. And look, if nothing else, lead your life by the example that you want to be treated. Now, I don't believe in the golden rule as much as I believe in the platinum rule, where the golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would like done unto them. And if you if you're going to do unto them as they'd like done unto them, you got to ask them what that is. You got to care enough to find out what that is. And I think it was either Gayal or Vishal that said something about don't listen to respond, listen to understand. And it's the same with the other agents out there. It's with the title companies. Some of you are in attorney states. We have to show that professionalism as an example. And I got to promise you this, and this is something that's come to me so much. The more professional I am, the more kind I am, the more what's the word I want to use? Just really being outgoing and kind to everybody, the more business that comes my way. I have been referred so many sales of agents' own homes because they said, I don't want to handle my own home. I'm not even in the same company, and they'll call me, would you handle the sale of my home for me? Or, insurance doesn't cover me if I represent myself, and I don't know anybody more professional than you to handle it. So you get rewards for doing it way outside of being able to just also use it, being your professional, as a way to get a lunch meeting or a coffee meeting with somebody to talk to them about, our how's business, how's life, what's going well for you, what's not going well for you. And that's how I start before I have a conversation about EXP. But yeah, I definitely love that you brought that question up because it's so important that we make a difference when we're out there. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more with acting in that manner. Anybody else want to chime in on difficult client or difficult situation? And then I want to go into maybe just setting boundaries, which is a little bit different than maybe a difficult client, but just making sure you're setting good boundaries with clients, with yourself even, because I think that's a really hard thing. And I know I didn't do a good job of that early in my career. And now it's like my phone goes off at 9 p.m. and it doesn't come on until I'm done with the gym in the morning. So I'm not getting, that's my mental health space. So who wants to chime in on that?
I try to have as much mental time space as possible, to be honest with you. But, I think, it's super important to have some boundaries with your clients. I was very much, in my life, I've got a very small bubble. Okay, I guess you could say that. I let people in and do too much all the time. And, for the first 5 years, I literally was at the beck and call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, didn't matter. I was there, and I felt that was what I had to do to show people that, I cared and that I was a professional and so on and so forth. What I found out later was that, people actually respect you more when you have that time that you say that, hey, you know what, like I'm blocking this time off for me and my daughter, and we're taking off, and, I've got a great group of people, so you're totally taken care of. Absolutely, if it's an emergency or something, somebody can get in touch with me. But, this is the time that I need for myself, for my family. So when you set those boundaries with people, you actually create a better relationship with people. And the other thing that I would like to kind of just touch on there is understanding what your clients' boundaries are. Like, do they want to receive 9 million text messages of everything that goes on? Or do they want to be phoned? Or do they have a certain time that, just doesn't work for them? So it's equally as important for you to have the time for yourself, but also have the time to understand the boundaries of your clients.
Ooh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I just assume everybody's busy. So like we try to remove as much off their plate as possible. We only hit them with the important stuff. And then we worked with this employee, and at the end of the transaction, they said, well, we were really disappointed. We didn't hear from you that much. And I was like, oof. So I think now what we do is we ask them up front, like, hey, where do you stand on this spectrum? Do you want to know every little thing? Do you want to be CC'd on every email? Or do you just want us to CC you in when we need a response from you? Or are you somewhere in between? And then we communicate based on their needs, like you're saying. So thank you, Lane. Who else wants to chime in about boundaries with clients?
I'd like to, if you don't mind. And I think the boundaries go across the board, because boundaries are most important so that you have good mental health. And believe me, I worked 7 days a week when I was brand new in this business for, I would say, the first 7 years. And then I heard a Mike Ferry cassette tape. Some of you aren't old enough to know what a cassette tape is, but I can remember listening to a Mike Ferry interview with Walter Sanford. And Walter Sanford said something so he said, if you never have a day off, you're never going to have a day on. And that's when I started taking, it was about the time my kids were smaller, and I started taking Saturdays off because that was the day they played baseball. And I ended up taking Saturdays off for 20 years. And I put it on my voicemail. People knew it. But, but that's all I did. And then a couple of years later, into my 20 years taking Saturdays off, I met a guy named Paul. He was with the Coldwell Banker office, and he handed me his card. As I walked away, I took his card out, and it said his name, Paul White, and underneath his name, the next thing in capital letters was off on Thursdays. It was great. I was like, wow, this guy's announcing to the world that he's off on Thursdays. So I was able to be very strict about my Saturdays off for 20 years because I set boundaries, and people say, well, how do you do that? I don't have anybody to help me. And I didn't have an assistant for part of that. I did for some of it, but when you're taking a Saturday off, your assistant isn't usually working. So I would get somebody that I appreciated and trusted. I'd say, hey, if you'll cover my Saturday for me, if I need any emergency calls handled, I'll cover whatever your day off is. And we traded that. Then later in 2005, my 25th year in the business, I had a business partner for a while, and she trained me. She goes, you will teach people how to treat you. And that was when texting started to be really a big deal. And she goes, I don't respond to text after X o'clock, whatever that was. I started hearing people leave voicemails. Their voicemail said, if this message comes to me after 7 p.m. or before 8 a.m., your call will be returned in the next business day. Things like that. So yeah, it's important that we all set boundaries. And I think that those boundaries are, depending, like sometimes I say, oh, that's a $4 million client. I tend to maybe sometimes break my own boundaries, but that doesn't work really well for my relationship with my wife. So yeah, we've got to take a check on it. We've got to teach people how to treat us, and we have to be that. And one of you said, and I thought it was brilliant, I think it was you, Lane, that said, you also want to find out what your client's boundaries are. And in my presentation to them, when I'm doing a listing presentation, or when they said, we're hiring you, I'll say, how and when do you like to be communicated with? I'll typically call you twice a week to give you updates. Does that work for you? Do you feel like twice a week is too much or too little? Like things like that. to set it up. And I let them know then. I typically don't answer my phone after 8 p.m. or after 7 p.m., whatever it is, things like that, so that it's all very clear to everybody. And I think if we spend just more time educating our clients, educating the other agents, and educating ourselves, we'll have a much better job of enjoying this industry. My son is 37, has a great career, and is just now deciding to leave his career, get into real estate. And I want to make sure that he skips all 37 years of mistakes and goes right to the 5 years that I did really well. So
that's great, Rick. Yeah, it's interesting in terms of, like you mentioned, training the industry. Basically, like commercial agents, like nobody responds on the weekends and nobody expects them to. So it'd be great if residential got on that same page in some regard. But one thing I like that you mentioned is being proactive. Like you're communicating with them twice a week proactively, and even if you're in the midst of a deal, like I think I have like an internal clock. I'm like, all right, well, we submitted the offer to the seller at 9 a.m. It's 3 p.m. I'm sure my buyer is wondering what the heck's going on. And so if I don't have an update from the listing agent, I'm messaging my buyer like, hey, just want to let you know, I reached out to the listing agent again. Like, I don't have an update, but you'll hear from me as soon as we do. And that way, if you're doing that before the end of the day, you're not going to get a 9 p.m. text from your client saying like, hey, I haven't heard anything from you since 9 a.m. And the other thing that you said was setting boundaries and making sure you stick to them, which is hard for all of us. Because like you said, with $4 million client calls, you want to cater to them. I think, for my first couple of years, the number of times I heard talk saying, put the hours in your voicemail and all these different things. Sometimes you just have to hear these things a bunch of times. So those of you that are here listening, and this is maybe the first or second time you're hearing about boundaries, you might just have to hear it a bunch of times, and it takes a little while to learn for yourself. And I think, the getting the days off is so important because I was having coffee with an agent and I said I went on vacation. She's like, what, you went on vacation as a real estate agent? That's unheard of. So, setting those boundaries and creating time for yourself. What was the, if you never have a day off, you'll never have a day on. So that was a good quote. So, Brian, how are we doing on time here?
It looks like we're coming up to the end of the show, David.
All right. Well, should we, anybody have do we have time for like one last round of people just giving a piece of advice, one sentence or something?
I would say before you go to bed every night, don't spend time concentrating on what you didn't get done. Take a few minutes to give yourself kudos for what you did get done and give yourself some grace.
And one thing I would like to add, that always focus on positive instead of negative interactions you have on the day. Always think about what positivity you are creating by your work around yourself. That will give you a good mental peace and good sleep at night.
Yes, love it. Gratitude.
I think too that we're in a world that we always see around us is negativity for the most part, right? And I think that building relationships with people is such an outstanding way to build a business. And I feel very grateful for the fact that I get to build relationships with not only my clients, but other agents and people in the industry, just like yourselves and everybody that's on this panel and everybody else that's watching today. And I always look forward to meeting every single person. I'm always available if anybody ever wants to reach out and, just build more relationships and treat it like a relationship transaction or relationship versus a transaction.
Great.
And I would like to add that consistency beats perfection all times. So it's in very few things we have to be perfect, but if we are consistent in more things in our daily life, we would see a drastic improvement in whatever we do. I mean, this is in general. I mean, I've applied it so many times and it's working.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you four rock stars. It's a great day to be icons. The stock was up, it was up like 20% in the last day. So those of you in the audience, make it to icons so you can get that company stock. And my last tip would be get 8 hours of sleep. It's the foundation of everything, is getting enough rest. So make sure you focus on that. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining today. This has been a really awesome ICONversations. If you are watching this on YouTube, please click that like button. David, thank you so much for moderating today. All of